Well, Frank sends Tony and Omar to Bolivia. Bolivia.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love and growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes to this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your three co-hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Coño Lyons.
All I have in this world is my balls and my word.
And each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, the three of us will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off of your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and going on right now, the three of us, Gene, King B, and myself are doing Watchmen over on HBO. So you can check out all the links, past episodes, viewer email, get engaged over at shatontv.com. That being said, this week's episode, Big D, we're still in the midst of doing and reviewing all of our commissions that we've had stacked up, right? We're
hoarding commissions.
Yeah, we're hoarding commissions. I'm still in Florida. We're recording together. I drove over today, and I don't know. It's kind of fun.
I think at this point we can just rebrand ourselves as a commissioned podcast.
I think so too.
Each week the audience pays us to do their movies. We toss them in the race car VHS tape rewinder, and once you all lose interest, we'll start taking votes.
That's right. So, what movie commission are we doing tonight, Big D?
Well, this is a movie that I'm shocked it took us this long to do. But Dale Anderson said, you guys need to do it. It's one of the best gangster movies out there. Everyone pretty much, I think, has seen it or they've heard of it. And it was the 1983 Al Pacino gangster classic, Scarface.
How much did he pay for this? And did he pay in dollars or did he pay in yayo?
Oh, that's a new one. We'll take Bitcoin and cocaine.
the yay. But we always ask when you do pay us in whatever denomination that you want to.
Stop saying they pay us. Say when you support us.
Well,
it makes us seem like much less of a bunch of whores. When you support us.
Okay. We do ask that you write in explaining why you gave us some money or why you supported the podcast. And he did send in a nice letter, which, Gene, you have right in front of you.
So Dale writes in, hey there, Dick, Roger, Gene, and Carrie. I stumbled upon your podcast earlier this year after devouring the Game of Thrones Shat on TV version and instantly got addicted. Your taste in movies is right in my wheelhouse, and I love your banter and the way you take the piss out of each other. You've provided me with hours and hours of entertainment and made my commute much more tolerable. Thanks. As I've been going through your back catalog of movie reviews, I just assumed that you'd already done one of the best movies of the 80s and 90s, and of all time, in my opinion, Scarface. When I figured out you hadn't done it yet, I knew that shit had to be rectified immediately. If there was ever a movie built for your podcast, it's this one. It's a legitimately great movie, 81% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's also a trashy, uber-violent, guilty pleasure type movie, all wrapped up in one super tasty Cuban tamale. It's hyper quotable, and I'm so excited about what quote Gene will use at the start of the show. Lots of options, Gene, but don't go with one of the overly obvious choices. Shit. I didn't see this movie in the theater as I was in middle school when it came out in 1983. I first saw it in the mid-90s when I rented it at Blockbuster as a 2-tape rental because it was too damn long for one tape. I was instantly drawn to the Shakespearean scale and tragedy of the story and to Pacino's mesmerizing performance. From the first frame, he grabs you by the short hairs and doesn't let go. There's a seething rage and intensity that is both Tony's ultimate strength and weakness that leads to both his enormous success and inevitable demise. The movie's style is super cool, too. This came out before Miami Vice, and you could see a ton of the same style cues: pastel suits, glass-walled mansions, pop soundtrack. This was a badass Miami Vice before it existed. It really paved the way for that South Florida cool vibe of the 80s. The violence is crazy too. Chainsaws chopping off limbs, guys getting hanged out of helicopters, that bonkers last scene. It's the height of 80s excess, and it was super controversial at the time, but it's one of the reasons I love it. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before, but it was also done very artfully. The chainsaw scene, for instance, doesn't really show anything. You get it all from sound effects, blood splatters, and Tony's face. Still some terrifying shit. I feel like this movie has morphed for me from a guilty pleasure to one I can openly talk about loving. The violence isn't as shocking by today's standards, so what you're left with is a great script by Oliver Stone, masterful direction by De Palma, and multiple powerhouse acting performances. Most now recognize it as the great movie it is. But what do you guys think? Looking forward to your review, and thanks again, Dale Anderson.
Well, Scarface is a 1983 American crime trauma film directed by Brian De Palma and written by Oliver Stone. It is a remake of the 1932 film and tells the story of Cuban refugee Tony Montana, played by Al Pacino, who arrives in 1980s Miami with nothing and rises to become a powerful drug lord. The cast also features Michelle Pfeiffer, Stephen Bauer, and Robert Loggia. Pacino became interested in the remake of the 1932 version after seeing it, and he and producer Martin Bregman began to develop it. De Palma hired Stone to write the script. The film was shot in Louisville and Los Angeles, which I think is just a shame when they could have gone down to Miami. But the film soundtrack was also produced by Giorgio Moroder. De Palma dedicated this version of Scarface after the writers of the original, Howard Hawks and Ben Hecht. Scarface was released on December 9th, 1983, and went on to gross $44 million at the domestic box office and $65.9 million worldwide. Initial critical reception was negative due to the excessive violence, profanity, and graphic drug usage. Some Cuban expatriates in Miami objected to the film's portrayal of Cubans as criminals and drug traffickers. And according to the Family Media Guide, which monitors profanity, sexual content, and violence in movies, Scarface features 207 uses of the F word, which works out to be about 1.32 F-bombs per minute. And in 2014, Martin Scorsese more than doubled that with a record-setting 506 F-bombs thrown in The Wolf of Wall Street. In the years that followed, however, critics have reappraised it and is now considered by some to be one of the best films in the crime genre and one of the greatest remakes ever. Screenwriters and directors such as Martin Scorsese have praised the film, and it has been referenced extensively in pop culture, especially in hip-hop music, as well as comic books, television programs, video games. And if you've ever been to a Florida flea market, tons and tons of sundries and all kinds of shirts and keychains and posters. With that being said, before we dive into the podcast, we always answer the question, where were you? What are your memories of this movie from your childhood? We'll start with you, Big D.
So I watched this on HBO a few years after it came out. And as a kid, it terrified me. This was a completely foreign world what I was used to. The chainsaw scene particularly, it was so real world. It was terrifying. At that point, when you're a kid, you're used to like Star Wars. There's good guy and bad guy. The good guy kills the bad guy because he's trying to do bad things. I never even conceived the possibility that in the real world, people just didn't want to kill each other. They wanted to torture someone for fun. It made me scared to think what people was out there, what dangers were out there. And I can remember getting to that chainsaw scene, and it took me probably 2 or 3 viewings to get through it because it made me uneasy. It made me nervous. It made me realize that it's a big fucked up world out there.
What about you, Gene? Have you ever seen Scarface?
I mean, I'm ashamed to admit it now after Dale's letter, but I'd never seen it. I'd always avoided this movie because every douchebag I ever met in college had a Scarface poster in his dorm room or apartment. All these people who were absolutely reprehensible, who I wanted to get the fuck away from, they'd be high off their asses and they'd always want to watch Scarface. I'd be like, I gotta go. literally the only part of this movie I've ever seen was the classic, say hello to my little friend. But I watched the trailer and I got squirmy with excitement. I was like, this is the movie for me.
I too, like you, Gene, I had never seen it because of all the wrong people that I encountered in my life worship this movie as well. I remember going over when I worked at Planet Hollywood shortly after college. I was bartending. One of the new douchey floor managers, he invited us over to smoke weed at his apartment, and he impressed us by pulling out his Scarface special DVD edition box set. I put a picture of it here in the notes. It looks like, I don't know, where he had the cocaine, where he pulls it out on his desk and he starts doing lines out of it. That's where there would be the multiple DVD box set and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, yo, check this out. This is my favorite movie. It's so good. Yeah. And it was so lame. I thought, I'm never going to be able to connect to this movie because anytime I watch it, I'm going to think of this exact moment.
I have more of an issue with fancy drug paraphernalia than worshiping this movie. I hate when I go to somebody's house and they name their bong or like they've got a special mirror for the coke. I'm like, just fucking let's do the drugs. Stop fucking around.
What? Someone named their bongs?
Oh, people name their bongs all the time.
Really?
I'm surprised you don't.
They have all
I don't
rituals.
have a bong.
Like, oh, let's go get the Dominator. Dun, dun, dun. They open the bookcase and you take it out. And yeah, people do a lot of crazy shit.
I mean, I've done like a gravity bong off like the second floor because it was so giant. But I mean, I don't know. That seems extra douchey to me too. I mean, I get.
But again, remember, you're the guy with a vape pen.
Listen, the vape pens, they've been proven it's the black market shit where they're putting vitamin E in it, not from reputable, legal, regulated stores.
I'm not worried about you dying. I'm worried about you just looking just really bad.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, I understand that you have to have some accoutrement for your drug use. Like I used to carry around a snuff kit, but I didn't name it. It wasn't like fancy and gilded. It was a necessity for inhaling tobacco, whatever.
Sure. I don't even know what's a snuff kit?
It's for inhaling tobacco.
Oh.
Like not in the smoky way, but in the powder way.
You can smoke powder?
I don't even want to ask.
No, you can snort tobacco.
You can?
Powder. Yes.
All right.
Snort tobacco?
You snort tobacco?
Yes.
Why?
That's a thing?
Because it gets you high.
Tobacco?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, with that piece of knowledge, Big D, play the trailer.
Okay, so what do you call yourself? Huh? ¿Cómo se llama?
Antonio Montana. And you? What you call yourself?
Where'd you learn to speak the English, Tony?
In a school. And my father, he was from the United States. Yeah, just like you know. He was a Yankee. He used to take me a lot to the movies, you know. I learned. I watched the guys like Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney. They teach me to talk. I like those guys. I always know one day I'm coming here, United States.
1980, Miami. They called it Little Havana, where the American dream had a price tag, and only one man in a million was hungry enough to pay.
This country, you gotta make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get the woman.
Scarface. For one brief moment, the world was his.
A chick is with. She like me.
You must be kidding.
What you talking about? That's a Cadillac.
How do you know?
The eyes, Chico. They never lie.
Man, that's the boss's lady, okay?
I am the boss. That guy's soft.
I like you, Tony. There is no lying in you.
Here's to the land of opportunity.
We do business together a long time.
I know the street. And I'm making all the right connections.
Remember I told you when you started, the guys who last in this business are the guys who fly straight.
With the right woman, there's no stopping me. I could go right to the top.
Fuck
word on the street, Tony, is you're not a small-time punk anymore. Supreme Court says that your privacy can be invaded.
You shoot the house this month?
You're spending a lot of money on this counter surveillance.
We're doing 10 million, 15 million a month. Come on. Now, that's serious money, you know? Your bank boys gotta come down a bit.
Who else can you trust? That's why you pay us when you do. You trust us. You're in good hands with us.
Al Pacino is Scarface. He loved the American dream with a vengeance. Al Pacino, Scarface.
In 1980, Cuban refugee and ex-convict Antonio Tony Montana arrives in Miami, Florida as part of the Mariel boat lift, where he is sent to a refugee camp with his best friends Manny Rivera, Angel, and Chichi. The four are released and given green cards in exchange for murdering a former Cuban general, Emilio Ribegna, at the request of a Miami drug dealer, Frank Lopez. They become dishwashers in a diner, but a disgusted Tony proclaims that he is meant for bigger things.
So if you didn't get the impression from the documentary footage, the Mariel boat lift was a real thing. Like, this actually happened in 1980. Actually, the week that I was, or during the boat lift, I was actually born in that period. So I kind of felt a connection there. Like, I'm a little Tony Montana. But the waves of criminals emigrating to the U.S. that we saw in this picture immediately reminded me of this kind of hype that's been going on right now around the immigration debate, that all these, criminals are coming up from South American countries and sending their worst to invade the U.S., except in the 80s, shit was really happening. Like, Cuba was actually sending people in boats, with prisoners on board. And I want to take a moment, actually, to point out, I've usually groan whenever anybody brings up This American Life as a podcast, because I'm like, oh, fuck, it's so tired. And it's just that same fucking nasally Ira Glass doing his fucking storytelling thing. But I highly recommend downloading the Outcrowd episode. It just came out like last week. It explains the horrors of the current stay in Mexico policy that's being carried out by U.S. asylum officers today. It's heartbreaking. And listening to that right before watching this movie gave me a whole different opinion of Tony. It made me far more sympathetic to him, to Chi-Chi, to Manny, and to Angel.
Well, I was sympathetic to Cuban immigrants because half of my family are Cuban immigrants. Like, my mom's father was from Cuba, and he immigrated with his sisters. And then my stepfather's mother is also, she immigrated shortly after the Bautista regime fell and Castro took over. But you talk about like some whitewashing of this film. Like, none of the main actors, like Al Pacino, Mary Mastrioni, how do I say her name? Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. Like, she's not Cuban, right? If you're going to make a movie about a Cuban refugee, at least use actual Cuban actors or even Hispanic actors. And I found, like, again, if you grew up with Cuban parents or Cuban grandparents, it just, I don't know, it just seemed very fake. And
so hold on, Roger, who's your favorite Cuban actor? And if you say fucking Ricky Ricardo or whatever his name, I'm going to hit you. Name a Cuban actor.
There's a few of them.
Yeah, exactly. You want to cast an entire movie with Cubans.
Yeah. I think that's Roger's point, is maybe if there had been a Cuban in this movie, we'd be able to mention a famous Cuban actor, but we can't because they took Al Pacino. But here's the thing, is this was Al Pacino's passion project. This was his idea. Yeah. He saw the 32, Scarface, and said, I want to do this movie. Mm-hmm. So it'd be kind of fucked up if they're like, all right, cool, but you can't be in it. What the fuck?
But it's a remake of the 1932 film, which is based on Al Capone. So why not just do an Italian mafioso, like an Italian immigrant?
Because they wanted to modernize
the Godfather. It. How many fucking Italian mafia movies you want? Let's mix it up.
Yeah, they wanted to make it politically relevant, but then that cause is thrown out the window when you have the worst film riot of all time. So I'm like, oh shit, things are going down at Little Havana. Like, things are going down in the Cuban camp. And then they got all these rioters, and it's like they just took 100 extras and all handed them lumber and forgot to tell them what to do with it. The riot consists of people tugging on fences and waving lumber around. I'm wondering, like, who are they rioting against? And then when Rebenga finally walks into the kill room, I'm like, oh, shit's gonna go down. There's like a little Havana pillow fight going on. People are fighting with mattresses and pillows. Thank God Pacino shows up and stabs him to get things back on track.
Okay, I want to give people a word of advice. Go back and watch this scene, but don't look at the whole scene. Focus on an extra. Pick anyone in the scene who's fighting. They're, like Gene said, holding a 2x4, and they're not actually swinging it at anybody. They're just gently tapping each other. It's really bad. But that whole camp is hilarious. When Al Pacino first gets the job to be the hit, he's playing like 30 on 30 basketball. What the fuck was that?
It looks like fun. It looks like people are having a good time. Also, Al Pacino playing basketball is the most hilarious thing I've ever seen on screen.
No, Al Pacino dancing is the funniest thing.
Al Pacino having sex.
But you mentioned that this was Oliver Stone. It was De Palma. This was a big budget film. And I don't know if it's just because today we have better audio equipment, but the ADR is off the charts bad. And for people who don't know, this is like usually they're shooting a scene. They can't use the audio recorded on scene because there's ambient noise. So they go back a lot of times and re-record it. Not only is the stuff slightly out of sync, but the rooms don't match. When Tony's getting interrogated in that tiny room, it sounds like they're in a church. It's really bad. And the music, it's like a synthesizer. I thought it had to have been John Carpenter who did this. It's very simple. It's very 80s. And I was not optimistic to begin with.
All right, so a lot of synth aficionados right now are tearing their hair out, Big D, because this soundtrack was done by the legendary Giorgio Moroder. He is huge in the synth community. The entire 2013 Daft Punk album, Random Access Memories, was like a love song to Giorgio Moroder. They even wrote a song on that album called Giorgio by Moroder, which has audio samples of Moroder explaining how he invented putting the click track on the Moog modular synthesizer. So basically, dance music in its modern form didn't exist until this guy, they used to have this thing called a click track. And it was an analog thing that would go into the synthesizer that would just tick, tick, tick like a metronome, right? And the composer would use that on a synth to be able to perfectly synchronize the music. And this guy was like, why don't we fucking put it in the music? And then dance music was born. You've got that guy doing your soundtrack, that fucking opening sequence bumps.
I guess the problem that I had in watching this movie is, and this has become a habit of mine, is every movie that we watch, because I want to be able to read the script and understand what the actors are actually saying, I'll turn on the captions. But you talk about the audio not syncing up. I couldn't find good captions to sync with what was going on screen. And that really, I think, affected, because, again, Al Pacino's doing such a terrible accent.
I completely disagree. I normally watch every movie or TV show with captioning on because I'm a reader. Like, I experience things through reading, and so I process dialogue better when I can understand every single word that's being said. In the case of Scarface, captioning was ruining my viewing experience. I was looking down from the screen, and the way Pacino emotes, the way he plays with words, the way he rolls them around in his mouth, it's absolutely gripping. I was stuck to the screen, and I had to turn off the captioning because I was like, fuck it, I'm missing the movie here. And it's one of the few movies, I mean, I watch Game of Thrones, Watchmen, Westworld. I've never had to do this, but in this movie, I was like, fuck the captioning. Let's just listen to this movie.
Well, Frank's right-hand man, Omar Suarez, sends the four to purchase cocaine from Colombian drug dealers, but the deal goes bad. Angel is dismembered with a chainsaw while Manny and Chichi rescue Tony and kill the Colombians. Suspecting that Omar set them up, Tony and Manny insist on personally delivering the recovered drugs and money to Frank. During their meeting, Tony is attracted to Frank's trophy wife, Elvira Hancock. Frank hires and befriends Tony and Manny. Months later, Tony is reunited with his mother, Georgina, and younger sister, Gina, of whom he is fiercely protective. Disgusted by his life of crime, Tony tells Manny to stay away from Gina.
So probably besides the climactic mansion shootout, this hotel chainsaw scene, it's probably the most iconic in the movie. And you feel the tension. It is shot beautifully. There's one part of it that Tony's come in, he's left the door open, he's feeling out what's going on. He's taken into the shower because the drug deal is going to go bad. The Colombians are going to kill them regardless and take the money. And without showing us any true violence, they just ratchet up the tension. And right when it's getting bad, Tony's in trouble. The camera pans to the window because we want to see what Manny and the other idiots are doing. And in one seamless shot, it goes out the window, down the side of the building, across the street. We see Manny in the convertible and he's hitting on the girls. It turns around, comes back up, and then it reveals the horror. And it's the sound of that revving chainsaw. And they don't show anything. They don't show them cutting. And that was cut. I thought it was an artistic choice. They cut it for the rating. It originally got an X, and that was the one thing that De Palma had to cut, was cutting flesh. But they just limit it to the sound, and then there's blood squirting on the curtain in Tony's face. It terrified me as a kid, and even to today, I find it unnerving.
I was watching this scene in my living room, big screen TV, and as that camera pans out, Big D, my jaw dropped at how masterfully this was done. And that doesn't happen very often. Normally I'm watching a movie for the podcast. I'm just being very critical. And I was like, holy shit, this is art. Taking that camera out of the hotel room across the street in that slow pan. And it contrasts the horrors of the drug trade in Miami with the beauty of Miami, this fun culture that's going on out there. And I was like, this is just genius. It's saying so much without saying anything.
Yeah, and just so people I know it wasn't one continuous shot. It wasn't Goodfellas as they come down and they go through the entire kitchen and they come out to the restaurant. But back then in 83, the cameras were gigantic. To do that shot and to have it seamless, that's some artistry.
Well, not only is there artistry in the direction, but also Al Pacino, I think, does a very effective job of emoting. You talk about turning off the subtitles, Gene. He has he speaks very little in this scene once he's kind of tied up next to his buddy who's being dismembered, and they're showing his face going from shock and horror to just accepting the fact that he's going to be next. And he just kind of like lets loose, like his body completely goes limp. And I was thinking to myself, how would you react if you and I were at a drug deal, Big D, and you saw me get, carved up?
Oh, I'm giving up the money. It's in the car. I'll take you to it. It's in the car. Let me go. It's in the car.
Well, not only that, but like, how are they keeping the sound of two chainsaws from a neighbor? Like, these are condos. These are small little apartments. How are they keeping all this volume of someone being listen, I'm going to scream if I'm being carved up, but they try and talk this into the plot by turning up the volume on a 20-inch tube TV. Like, do you really think that's going to drown out the sounds of your best friend being carved up?
Well, I mean, Angel's mouth was taped shut, so you got that going on. But also, it looked like a really tiny chainsaw, because if you think about it, it was in a briefcase with 2 kilos of coke. It fit in there, so it's not like a big chainsaw. It's more like it's like for trimming shrubbery or something.
Like a baby chainsaw.
Yeah, and I think in Miami, you mind your own business.
You
just want to, in your head, think, maybe they're doing some wood crafts.
I don't know.
They're building a bookshelf.
Yeah.
I don't know. Roger's kind of got a point, because there were a lot of people outside being like, what the fuck is going on? After gunshots were heard.
Yeah, if you've ever lived next to some Jewish retirees, they're constantly in your business. Always, when you make a little bit of noise, they're bopping their broomsticks up on their ceiling. But the problem is I've never done cocaine. Like, the hardest drug I've ever done in my life was MDMA, was ecstasy. And I haven't done that again since college. I've never done cocaine for a couple of reasons. Number one, my dad got really into cocaine, and it kind of ruined his life early on when he was young and he had to get sober. So I saw him kind of struggle with that. And then number two, I'm almost 1,000% positive that if I tried it, I'd like it so much. And then I too would become my father and become addicted to it. And then all my money would go to cocaine. Have you guys ever done cocaine? Is cocaine really that good? Like, what does it feel like?
No, I've done it. That's the way I feel about crystal meth. Crystal meth has got to be fucking great, because you're willing to just burn your life to the ground. Oh, do I got to pick the kids up at school? No, I'm going to sit here and do crystal meth. Oh, do I got to go to work? Nope. That sounds like that'd be great. I mean, whatever. I never purchased cocaine.
So you were just around people that had cocaine?
If it was around, it's like if somebody buys a pizza, you got to take a slice.
So in this movie, we talked about the violence. We've talked about the drugs. And that's, if you ask somebody about Scarface, that's what they usually will bring up. But there was this surprise for me. Like, my favorite surprise about this movie was this friendship between Tony and Manny. And the biggest laughs in this movie are these subtle things that come from that friendship. So like after he gets totally shut down by Elvira, Tony is driving Manny home in the convertible, and like Manny's drunk and kind of just, his head's lolling around. And Tony's like, she liked me. It was cute. And watching these two guys who are clueless, like navigate their way through a new country, it made me pull for them. Like I wanted them to be best friends forever. But you see this scene outside Tony's mama's house when he goes to visit mama. And it did drive home an important point. First of all, that Manny's creepy because like Tony's talking to his sister for a while. Then the camera goes over and Manny's just sitting there. I was like, whoa, what's he doing there? But also Manny is no longer Tony's equal. You see that from this scene on. He's waiting outside in the car. And more importantly, he's now Tony's driver. Like Tony used to be the guy who was driving. Now it's Manny. Tony's kicking back with the cigar. He's bossing Manny around. And that shift in the friendship, again, brilliantly done by De Palma and crew. It's foreboding. It gives us insight into what power means between men of this underworld. If you're driving the other guy, you work for him, basically. You're under him. And these guys all are playing that game of shifting positions. Is really, really brilliant.
And Manny's completely fine being the driver. Manny doesn't want to take over the world. Manny just wants to chase girls by the pool. He wants to enjoy life, take it easy. Tony's about just conquering the world. And we're introduced, you mentioned Tony's mom. To me, people remember Pacino. You remember Steve Ballmer, who plays Manny. The outstanding performance for me was Mama Montana. She was played by Miriam Colon. She's amazing. She's genuine. There's a completely realistic vibe to her. She's the Cuban mom. She's calling him a loser. You're not going to buy me with jewelry. You think you can come into my house with your hotshot clothes and your jail manners and make fun of us? She's lashing into him like it's his mom. It's believable. She's telling him, take your lousy money out of here. It stinks. You're going to destroy Gina's life. There is an authenticity to her performance in Tony that right when he becomes comical, he becomes this over-the-top caricature of a drug dealer. You remember, that's all an act. And his mama is calling it out. And there's Tony Montana deep in there hiding under all of that false bravado.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The most accurate portrayal, I can confirm this, is that Cuban mother. My Cuban grandmother, the only thing that's missing from this portrayal from Miriam Colon's performance is her watching her telenovelas while eating some frijoles negros and rice. But we're also then introduced to Gina.
Yeah, as great as Mama was, Raj, Gina, played by, as you mentioned, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, she's a real bummer. and people really salute this performance by her. But that scene where she's talking with Tony about Papa outside of their mom's house, it was just melodramatic trash. It was really a sore spot in this movie. It was almost like she was reprising her role from West Side Story. She did the West Side Story revival in the 80s. And you could see like she was basically Maria from West Side Story. Also, if you doubt the veracity of what we're saying about this garbage acting, she was also awful in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. This woman cannot act. Great body, can't act.
Oh, she looked good. And she had that big like 80s, like late 70s fro going on too. Ah, she looked gorgeous. Well, Frank sends Tony and Omar to Bolivia to meet with cocaine kingpin Alejandro Sosa. Tony negotiates a deal without Frank's approval, angering Omar, who leaves to contact Frank. Sosa claims that Omar is a police informant and that Frank has poor judgment, and Tony witnesses a beaten Omar hanged from a helicopter. Tony vouches for Frank's organization, and Sosa, taking a liking to Tony, agrees to the deal, but not before warning Tony to never betray him. Frank is infuriated by Omar's demise and the unauthorized deal struck by Tony.
Okay, so we're finally introduced to Frank's rules. And they make sense. Lesson 1, don't underestimate the other guy's greed. Makes sense. Lesson 2, don't get high on your own supply. I don't know if that's where it came from that everybody says it, but it makes sense. Where is lesson 3? Don't try to fuck the boss's girl. Tony is a clear threat. He's reckless. He's doing it in front of Frank. Within the first day, hey, go pick her up. He kisses her in the front of the car. He goes and tries to buy a Porsche to impress her. He's trying to get in her pants right away. Tony is a clear threat, and no one, especially Frank, seems to see what Tony's doing until it's too late.
But, you know, in this scene where Frank is dishing out his rules, we get the first look at this Miami nightlife. And Dale mentioned the style in this movie. It is oozing in this scene. Like, I don't know a lot about Chi-Chi. I don't know a lot about Omar, but their clothing and their mannerisms really bring this movie to life. Like you mentioned, Big D, the color in this movie. There are about a dozen other characters from Sosa to Alberto the Shadow who make Scarface one of the most character-rich and colorful movies I've ever seen, especially considering it was made in the 80s, where we had fairly flat characters and not a lot of panache. But my favorite, by far, an often overlooked character is Nacho El Gordo Contreras. He's like that fat guy in the club with that huge mustache that's yammering away on the phone. We only see him for about 10 seconds as Frank explains that he's a chaza, but that's enough to make me to be Nacho when I grow up. I want to be that fat guy that can't fly right. He looks like he's having the best time at anybody in this movie.
Yeah, if that guy can go to one of those cool clubs, it gives me hope that maybe I could go to one of those cool clubs.
Right.
Like I've never thought of myself as one of those that could actually go to one of those cool clubs. I feel like, Gene, you have the style and the panache and the pizzazz to be in one of those VIP booths. Big D, I don't know. Could you ever see yourself going to one of those clubs and dancing on the dance floor?
I will do anything at least once.
Okay.
Anything.
Your inner Sandy will come out.
She's fucking go. Oh, I just got to give an update on that. I went to Brazil for the last 10 days, and there were times where my inner Sandy was down, and I purposely said, what would Sandy do? What would Sandy do? I didn't bitch and moan. I went out and did it, and I had a better vacation because of it.
I think it's also the part of the movie where I start thinking to myself, if there was a Scarface drinking game, you'd be pretty drunk by now, because you know these drinking games, right? Where you set certain rules as you kind of follow along. Anytime someone says "mang," that would be a time to drink. Anytime someone does a line of coke, or Tony smokes a cigar, someone is murdered, or Manny taunts someone with his tongue, or Tony says "cockroach." Like, I feel like those are moments. Like, if you want to at home drink along after you listen to this podcast, do those rules. By this point in the movie, you should be blackout drunk.
Yeah, I was going to say, this would be a great game if the movie wasn't 3 hours long. Everyone's going to be dead at the end of it. If I could add an amendment to this drinking game, I'd like to introduce coño. Because at this point in the movie, we've heard the word coño about 200 times. And for listeners in Ireland and Wyoming who might not know, coño means different things in different countries that speak Spanish. So in Spain, it's very vulgar. Like, coño is basically the same as saying pussy, or, pardon my French, cover your children's ears. I hate saying this word, but I'll do it for you, dear listeners. Cunt. But to Cubans, it's far less vulgar. It just means something close to damn. So please don't think Tony and his crew are just running around being complete slimeballs when they say coño. They have no clue when it comes to women, and they're intensely misogynistic. But in this case, it's pretty innocent. It's just like saying damn or dang, and that's why it comes up so often.
So our primary mission is to go back and look at movies and say, do they hold up today? This movie presents an interesting problem because there's been certain things that have come along since Scarface, like Narcos, that give us a more realistic idea of what it's like behind the scenes of a big drug organization. This is a more stylized 80 dramatization of what, a big time drug lord would do. But I know the shit that Pablo Escobar would do if you even just stepped 1 foot out of bounds. So for me, it's hard to kind of balance that. Yes, it's entertaining, but there's stuff that's going down that I'm like, please, Pablo would kill Tony. He'd kill them all in 2 seconds.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Big D. Any decent kingpin would ice a guy who made an unauthorized deal for millions of dollars and then returned without the guy he was sent there to protect. That doesn't seem slightly suspicious. He came back. What the fuck happened to Omar? Oh, I don't know. They hung him from a helicopter. Yeah, that sounds likely. It's not like Frank is watching the movie. To him, he's like, Omar got hung from a fucking helicopter and you made a multi-million-dollar deal? Okay, I guess. And so I think the only thing we could chalk that up to is the movie is trying to tell us in a very ham-handed way that Frank is fucking soft. And he fucking is. Robert Loggia, all the respect in the world, love Robert Loggia. But he's fucking soft as a character, and that's why Tony eventually unseats him. It's that hunger and the ability to do what Frank won't.
Yeah, Jesus, one of the worst ways to die, being hanged from a helicopter. That's got to be a bad way to die. But Narcos, we talked about being an amazing series. But if you ever really want to watch like a documentary behind the Medellin cartel and what happened and just how powerful of a figure Pablo Escobar was, watch the 2 Escobars on ESPN Plus. It's fantastic. I think it's like it's two parts. So I think it's like a total of 3 hours or maybe even approaching 4 hours. But it talks about the power vacuum that happens in Medellin after Pablo Escobar because he wasn't soft, because he would ice someone if they got out of bounds. And in some weird, perverse way, that kept the power. His rule was you don't go after civilians. You don't go after children, right? Because he wants the population on his side. So it makes it easier for him to deal his drugs and do his business. Well, Elvira reveals that Tony has started his own cocaine distribution operation, and at a nightclub, corrupt detective Mel Bernstein attempts to extort money from Tony. Tony spots Gina and her drug dealer boyfriend Fernando making out in the men's bathroom while she snorts cocaine. Both of them are beaten by Tony, and hitmen attempt to assassinate Tony, but he escapes. Tony then confronts Frank, who confesses to the attempted hit and begs for his life, but he and Bernstein are killed. Tony then marries Elvira and becomes the distributor of Sosa's product. He builds a multi-million-dollar empire, living in a vast, heavily guarded estate.
So Big D talked about Narcos and the reality of the drug trade and how this movie fails to capture that it's a little over the top. It's a little fantastic. It's an 80s understanding of what the drug trade is like. At this point in the movie, I'm starting to realize that this movie is not meant to be completely accurate. It's more of a tale of symbolism. It's more literary. It's almost like a novel. And so I'm like, oh, this basically mirrors The Great Gatsby, which is also very surreal. Like, it's not meant to be taken literally. There's some serious symbolism that's rich enough to deserve literary dissection. I know people might be rolling their eyes right now, but hear me out. So Elvira, for instance, right? She's the American dream that Tony's chasing. Like, he doesn't love her. He doesn't know who the fuck she is, right? She's just beautiful. She's white. She thinks that she's too good for his humble banana boat beginnings. And so kind of like a Jay Gatz sort of thing here, he's chasing that dream or that blimp that flies by. I think that's the most obvious symbol. It's reading "The world is yours." And you're like, that's kind of weird. And then you realize it's just displaying a Pan Am airline slogan. And the biggest symbol of all is that tiger tethered to the tree. And people have asked, like, what the fuck is that all about? It even came up on Twitter today. That tiger is Tony. He's a predator, and he sees himself in the tiger. He makes Manny go with him to the zoo all the time to see the tiger, and he tells everybody at the auto dealership that he's going to, get a tiger, maybe a she tiger that's going to sit in the passenger seat, whatever. And that tiger, if you notice, is tethered to like a tree, and Tony is that predator. He doesn't realize that all the things that he's earning are the things that are going to tie him down. And Big D mentions that his physical movement becomes more compact. He becomes more reserved. His language becomes cleaner. He's not that hungry immigrant anymore. And it eventually becomes his demise. So there's so much symbolism going on that would be impossible if this movie were 100% accurate to the drug deal, which is fairly mundane.
Yeah, it's not only, a Gatsby tale or draws allusions to the Gatsby, and I like that comparison. Other people have also compared this to Macbeth, right? Going back even further about the downfall, the rise of someone who ultimately, when he achieves power, is then taken down by his own ambitions. It's also, again, I didn't know this until I researched it, but again, Scarface was a 1930s movie that did feature "The world is yours." That motto was part of the original movie, but the movie was then based on a novel written by Armitage Trail in 1929 and published in 1930. The author, Armitage Trail, actually died suddenly of a heart attack when he was 28. So the book's storyline is heavily inspired by the real-life gangster Al Capone, whose nickname, get this, guys, was also Scarface. It concerns the rise and fall of Tony Scarface Camonte, who, after performing a hit on a mob leader, Al Springola, moves in to take over the illegal alcohol business in Chicago during the Prohibition era. He's ultimately shot dead by his brother, who concurrently rises in the ranks of a Chicago PD, who fails to recognize him due to the family believing him to have died in World War I. So again, I think Gatsby's a good one, the Roaring Twenties, and, possibly the author pulled from that. But again, I think when you look back even further, Everything is kind of inspired by Shakespeare when you think of Western literature, and so there's definitely kind of a Macbeth. But I like the tiger thing, and also, can we talk about the 928? Like, I would never trade in my drop top Cadillac with zebra print custom seats for the worst Porsche ever made. My stepfather bought a 928 and was a piece of shit.
I mean, but did your stepfathers have machine gun turrets and bulletproofing on the sides? I thought he was actually going to do it. When I was watching this movie, I'm like, oh, he's going to do that shit.
Yeah. No, give me a banana yellow Cadillac with fucking zebra stripes any day.
No, but as much of an idiot Tony is for obviously trying to pick up on the boss's girl, he does some things that are smart. When the hit goes down in the club, he doesn't know who did it. He thinks he knows who did it. He thinks that it had to be Frank, but you could end up going after Frank and you've left the enemy still out there who's laying in the bushes waiting to kill you again. So he does something real smart and real simple. He tells one of his guys, I think it's Nick the Pig, and he tells Nick, listen, at 3:00 sharp, just call Frank at his desk and say he got away. That's it. And he says it again. What time are you going to call? 3:00. I'm going to call 3:00. So when Tony goes into the room, and they're sitting there. He's like, oh, Tony, you know what? It's got to be those Diaz brothers. We're going to get those sons of bitches. We're going to make them pay. The phone call comes in, and Frank says, oh, yeah, I'll be home soon. Tony immediately knows who it was. He knows that it was Frank, and he eliminates him right there. Very smart move, and I like that for Tony.
Can we talk about this entire night, though? I appreciate efficiency in storytelling, but Brian De Palma somehow made a 3-hour movie in which almost everything significant happens on one night. And that's not even the film's climax. So let's take stock here. At the same night at Club Babylon, you got Tony moving in on Elvira. You got Tony in a standoff with Frank. You got Tony meeting with Mel, the corrupt cop who just shows up. You got Tony attacking Gina in the bathroom. Also, an attempted hit on Tony. You've also got Richard Belzer doing a stand-up act. Yeah. Uh-huh. And then that weird fucking Venezuelan dancing around.
What's going on there?
Space this shit out.
Well, yeah, I had the same thought. I was like, oh, it's fucking Richard Belzer doing a horrible impression of Don Rickles. But then I was even more surprised to see that Venezuelan clown thing come out. Like, if I'm at a fucking swank South Beach club, you know, I don't want this thing to be my entertainment, let alone Richard Belzer. So I'm kind of glad that the hit went down.
Yeah, I was fully expecting the entire purpose of that Venezuelan dancer to be that he was the guy that was ultimately going to pull off the hit. Right, but instead, we get this fucking amateur botch job by these awful hitmen. No wonder Frank is losing his empire. Everyone this guy hires is completely fucking incompetent. So Omar goes down to make a drug deal and gets hung from a helicopter by fucking Bolivians. Angel gets chainsawed to death. Ernie does jack shit to protect Frank when he's going to get killed. What are you getting paid for? And then these two hitmen are so bad that in this Club Babylon scene, they literally shoot a lighting rig that lands on them. I don't even know how that happens.
Dude, how did these two guys get primo seats for Richard Belzer's performance? They were right in the front there, but they're like looking at each other back and forth. Like, I don't think they spoke English. So they're looking at this comic and they're looking at this Venezuelan thing like fucking Americans are crazy. They've got these weapons wrapped in like a white napkin. They have them under the table, then they put them on the table. They put them under the table, then they put them on the table. It's a little obvious what they're doing.
It kind of looks like, or kind of mirrored that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, kind of the opening hitman scene. That's kind of what it looked like.
I'm half convinced that they were just there to actually kill the Venezuelan guy because they do a shit job of hitting Tony.
Oh, they shot the fuck out of those lights, though. They can hit those lights.
Well, by 1983, Tony becomes dissatisfied with his lifestyle and cocaine addiction. A sting by federal agents results in Tony being charged with tax evasion with an inevitable prison sentence. Sosa offers to use his government connections to keep a desperate Tony out of prison, but only if Tony assassinates a journalist. Tony accuses Manny of causing his arrest and Elvira of being an infertile junkie, causing Elvira to leave him. He travels to New York City to carry out the assassination with Sosa's henchman, Alberto, who plants a radio-controlled bomb under the journalist's car. However, the journalist is unexpectedly accompanied by his wife and children. Disgusted, Tony kills Alberto before he can detonate the bomb and returns to Miami.
Okay, so like you said, Gene, this is almost a 3-hour movie. And I have a problem with the way they chose to allocate their time for Tony's story. You dedicated most of the first half to Tony's rise from, being a refugee in that camp under I-95. We get a slightly less amount of time spent on the second half, the fall. Where the hell is that middle part? Where is it where Tony's made it? We want to see him grow his operation. We see his process. He's making money. Instead of that, we get push it to the limit, right? Set to a montage that was Tony on the phone, smiling and laughing with Sosa, people in a room counting money, Vance delivering a duffel bag of cash to the bank. Tony then, he's going to launder the money. So he creates all these businesses like Montana's Beauty Salon, Montana's travel agency, Montana's management. I like that they put the detail in how he's going to try to launder the money. But where was the time in the middle where we could see him make it? He's on top of the mountain. He goes from making it to falling. And there's nothing more 80s than that song, Push It to the Limit. If you listen to the lyrics, it's telling you, it's like, Tony's going to make it. Oh, yeah. Tony's going to fall. Don't push it. So I'm going to play you a little bit here, just in case you haven't seen the movie.
Can't wait to get demonetized on YouTube.
Open up the limit. Past the point of no return. Reach the top, but still you gotta learn how to keep it.
You gotta learn how to keep it.
Hit the wheel and double the stakes. Throttle wide open like a bat out of hell. You crash the gate.
Jesus. They're telling you Tony's stories, pushing the limits.
Guys, I don't know about you, but I really wanted to jazzercise to that.
Yeah, I used to work with a guy named Ross Bischoff, who's a sports editor at the Lyman News, and he would sing that song to me in the newsroom. I had no idea it was a real thing. I thought he was just making fun of me. He'd be like, push it to the limit. I'd be like, all right, Ross, fuck off.
Yeah. Well, you think of how far we've fallen as a society. In the early 1980s, a journalist could own a very fancy car and live in a building in New York City with a doorman and have a happy marriage with kids. That's not the case today there, Gene, is it?
No, certainly not. You get forced into digital marketing instead of pursuing your passion and live the rest of your life thinking, if only I'd been born 20 years earlier, I could have seen Scarface in theaters and also had a flourishing career as a journalist. But, Raj, everything comes full circle. Speaking of full circle, Tony, they did this amazing twist here that I really liked. And again, I get it that it's completely improbable from a realism standpoint, but it's kind of cool that Tony came to America. He had to kill a guy to get out of the cage. Now he's got to kill a man to stay out of prison, and he doesn't, right? So the first time in the refugee camp he does, now he refuses to, and instead he ends up killing Alberto, the Shadow, Sosa's guy. And some people look at this and they're like, oh, Tony's standing up for something, right? So he's like protective of the women in his life. He's been unable to have children he's always wanted. And so he's refusing to kill the journalist because the journalist is with his wife and children. But here's the thing. Tony didn't have to do anything. All he had to do was fucking drive the car. Like, he's not the one killing that family. By killing Alberto, Tony shows that he's actually just fucking lost it. Like, he's not even thinking straight anymore at this point.
You're saying Tony's just drive the car? Why the fuck is Tony in New York? He's a drug kingpin. Doesn't he have foot soldiers? His entire drug organization, it seemed like, consists of 4 people. Manny, Ernie, Chi-Chi, and Nick the Pig. That's the entire movie.
I got a theory on that.
Okay.
And that's that he's paranoid. Like, he's got to be there to do it himself because he doesn't trust anybody, right?
So he's micromanaging. He's a micromanaging drug kingpin.
Right. Big D, he's in the fucking van every time they make a drop at the bank. What's he doing in the van? Fucking stay home. You got people to do that shit for you. Get Nick the Pig to take his sorry ass down to the bank and do it himself.
It's at this point, again, for those listeners who've never seen Scarface and are just listening to the podcast to hear us break down of it, you would think that this point in the movie, they're in New York, they're doing a hit, this would be exciting, but this is the point where I found myself being disinterested because it just feels like, again, it's getting long. It's kind of boring. I know I have massive ADHD, but did you guys get the same instance? Did you guys feel the same way? It was just kind of dragging.
Raj, I wasn't bored, but I definitely thought that they could have split the movie. So like right when he kills Frank, that's the end of Scarface 1.
Right.
And then Scarface 2 is the rest of it. And I think that would have really helped. So like an hour and a half per movie would have really helped. And then they could have kind of fleshed out what Big D was saying, like some of the other parts, so that you would have had like more of his maintenance phase, I guess, when he was just rich. Maybe have some comedy scenes there. I don't know. Some cameos.
And if somebody out there can fact check me here, if I remember correctly, the split between tape 1 and tape 2 was the blimp. So Tony has killed Frank. He's become the new become the new gangster, and they cut it right there. So that's what I remember. I don't know if that's accurate because I don't have a 2-tape set of Scarface, but I think that's where they chose to cut the movie.
And I think that's a testament to the movie being too long, as Roger's saying, you got a scene where a guy just got his brain splattered against a window, and Roger's like, I'm kind of bored right now.
Yeah, and it's not just any guy. This is a cameo that I was like super excited to see.
Yeah, so Alberto is played by Mark Margolis, who plays Tio Salamanca in Breaking Bad, and he's fantastic in Breaking Bad, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, I know we didn't cover it for Shat on TV. I know all of you listening only watch the shows that we cover, but listen, Breaking Bad, little show, you might have heard of it. It's pretty good. But that's not the only connection between Scarface and Breaking Bad. In fact, the writer of Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan, said that Walter White is Scarface. He's based on Scarface's meteoric rise and fall. So when you're watching Breaking Bad, if you haven't, or if you're revisiting it, keep that in mind that this movie not only took from things that came before it, like Macbeth and the original Scarface, but also inspired things that came after it, including Breaking Bad.
Yeah, and in Breaking Bad, there's also the dissolution of marriage once Walter White achieves the money and the power and his goals. And, they talk about this in the movie. You got to get the money, because then you get the money, then you get the power. And once you have the money and the power, then you get the girls. But no matter how much money you have, no matter how much power you have, no matter how much in control of your life is, and you get the girl of your dreams, eventually it's all going to fail. And this is why I haven't been married. This is why I'm so afraid of commitment, because the relationship will always go south.
Well, listen, you can't use this movie to kind of map out which relationship will happen or where it will go, because it's abbreviated. You chose to show us tape of guys carrying a duffel bag and counting money 50 times. We went from, oh, it's a wedding. Yay, there's a tiger. Let's celebrate. So the next scene we see them, they're at like dinner. Tony's coked up and lecturing her about that she can't have a child. She's saying, what kind of father would you be? You'd be dead. You're not going to take him to school. And then he's yelling at all the other patrons. Hi, I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad guy. You see me? I'm the bad guy. You're bad, but you hide it. I can't hide it. Where's the middle part? It went off the rails in it seemed like an afternoon.
Well, I think the middle part was in his jacuzzi. Was that like a TV room with the indoor jacuzzi? Like, first of all, this is the problem I have with the 80s. Why would you put carpet in your jacuzzi room?
Because you can.
Because you can.
You just have somebody fucking replace that shit. He's Biff Tannen. But yeah, you put shag carpet, then you get fucking Nick the Pig to replace the carpet.
Listen, I know neither of you guys have ever been to Florida, but it gets really chilly in Miami. You don't want to be walking on cold floors when you get out of your tub. You need some carpet.
Well, Tony finds Manny with his sister Gina. Tony then shoots Manny dead, after which Gina tearfully tells Tony that she and Manny had just gotten married the day before and wanted to surprise him. A stunned and remorseful Tony returns to his mansion, bringing Gina along, and begins a massive cocaine binge by himself in his office. While Sosa's men begin attacking the mansion, a drugged Gina appears and accuses Tony of wanting her for himself and attempts to kill him, but is slain by one of Sosa's men, who is in turn killed by Tony. With Tony's men all dead and assassins outside, Tony turns a grenade launcher-equipped M16A1 on Sosa's men, mowing down many. However, he is fatally shot from behind by a shotgun-wielding assassin known as the Skull. His corpse falls into a fountain below in front of a statue with the inscription, "The world is yours," end movie.
Okay, so I understand in the beginning that Frank chose to use him to commit a hit, even though he wasn't a professional assassin. But who are these clowns that Sosa is sending over the wall? There's like 35, 40 of them. They're completely incompetent. They breach the mansion and they line up on the stairs. It's like they're on the fucking Bachelor waiting for the Bachelorette.
Waiting for the rose.
They evenly space each other out. So when Tony comes out, he can just, okay, I'll shoot the left side. I'll shoot the right side. And also, just so you guys know, you said he has a 203. That shoots a 40 millimeter round. To breach that door, that's not going to work, folks. I think I've told this story before. The 203, it takes a distance. It has to spin a certain amount before it arms. It's 45 to 88 feet before it arms. So if you shoot it straight into the ground, it's not going to do anything. And I mentioned I had some idiot private in the Army do that on a range. He's like, what a boom, and shot that shit straight into the ground. It won't blow up. But when it does blow up, it'll have a casualty radius of like 400 plus feet. Wow. And it'll have a kill radius of 15 feet. Tony is about 10 feet from that door. He is 100% deaf, and he is certainly dead.
Yeah. You come for the movie reviews and the humor and you stay for the military tactics. I think that's the beauty of this podcast.
So however shitty these Bolivian hitmen are, I don't think, I think the Skull is like the leader and the rest of them are just kind of like cannon fodder, but they do a pretty good job on Tony's men, including the one guy, which I'm pretty sure served me at Benihana like a month ago. The guy that is just running around with a fucking knife. They didn't even give him a gun. He just runs around tackling people with a fucking knife.
That's the knife guy. You always got to have a knife guy.
Yeah, you got to have the knife guy. And listen, by the way, if anybody wants to get us Shat gifts, go on our Amazon Emporium. Please get me a really nice knife. I don't know what kind of knife to buy, guys. I really want a nice kitchen knife, so hook me up. Christmas is right around the corner. But speaking of death, and there's lots of this movie, before we get to this final scene where Tony is fighting off all these attackers, we get the death of Manny, which is the saddest part of the movie, in my opinion. And while it's super sad, you gotta wonder, why Gina and Manny thought it would be a good idea to surprise a coke-addled, paranoid, hyper-violent, overprotective killer. I'm just a normal guy. And if my sister came over and knocked on the door, I wouldn't have someone I just slept with come out in a silky robe with their cleavage showing. And my sister doesn't do half the cocaine Tony Montana does.
Surprise!
Yeah.
But listen, Manny doesn't deserve to die for the Gina bit. He should die for poor work performance. He abandoned Tony for 3 or 4 days when he needed him the most.
Right.
You don't think to give Tony a heads up. You don't have to tell him, hey, we're going to get married. Say, Tony, I know you're in New York. You're going to carry out an assassination. I'm holding down the business, but I'm going to be away for 3 days. He doesn't even do that, so he deserved to die.
Well, I didn't really get the whole incest angle. That kind of surprised me. You talk about the surprise death of Manny. This whole, when she shows up and she's like, you really want me? Tony, don't you want me? Here I am. Come and get me, Tony. Look at this. This is what you want all the time. I was like, is that really what he wanted? Or was he just overprotective of his sister?
No, she'd lost her mind. I mean, she fell in love. She got married. He killed her love. I mean, you can see Tony's reaction after she's dead, the way he goes to her and he's talking about Manny, he's talking about her. I don't think that there was a true incestuous angle there, but that to her, I mean, it's the only thing that makes sense, right? This guy doesn't want you to be with anybody else.
Yep.
And, I actually thought that the movie, they really stretched it here. I mean, they really went for it. I think that audiences in the 80s must have been like, what the fuck? Because it was 2019 and I was like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
But dude, did you pay attention to music? When he gets shot, it slow-mos and he falls and it's the music went super sad over the top. I'm like, dude, I get it. We're supposed to care about Manny. I don't need the soundtrack to pull that out of my emotion. I get it. I didn't need a slow-mo fall to the floor. And yes, put some clothes on first.
Well, I think the problem with the movie is that it just sort of ends too. It's you have the slow-mo, you have the pan up, once you see the neon world with the tag of, the world is yours, that that's how the movie's going to end. He's going to fall into that thing and into the pool. Again, another pool that he has indoors. I guess that was the ultimate 80s status symbol. If you had an indoor pool
next to carpet,
yeah. you were rocking. But it just sort of ends. And that as soon as he falls into the pool after that music, I don't know. It was abrupt to me for a 3-hour movie. Really abrupt.
But it works for me because we get that kick-ass theme. You know, you said, Gene, that the synth community really loved the guy who did the score. Yes, this final song is great. And when it goes into that main theme, I'm okay, and I love it. And there is a slight difference at the end that I couldn't tell what it was. And upon doing research, I was blown away to find out that De Palma actually had Steven Spielberg, who was a friend, with him on set. And he let Spielberg shoot that final attack on the house. So when they're doing this low angle coming up to the house, that's Steven Spielberg.
That's pretty rad.
Let Steven Spielberg. Let him. Like Steven Spielberg shows up on the set. He's like, and Brian De Palma's like, I guess I'll let you, little unknown director, shoot this. He was probably like, fuck yes, we got Steven Spielberg on set. Let's go. He was also probably just exhausted because he's like, fuck, I've been filming this thing for like 10 years.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, he just did E.T., so they're similar films.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
wonder
that average movie, E.T., that Rogers sort of thought was okay.
Okay,
it is just sort of okay.
Have the camera, guys. Okay, yeah. We're going to cut this. We'll do this in post.
Speaking of okay, now it's time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to it before, 5 wipes is an absolute bloodbath. It's being attacked by multiple Bolivian and Colombian hit assassins and being riddled with blood, and it just splatters all over your indoor carpet next to your jacuzzi as you fall in and die because of all of the shat that's everywhere. So that's 5 wipes. A 0 wipe is a sparkling, clean porcelain toilet, again, on your carpeted bathroom. That being said, 0 wipes is good, 5 wipes is bad. We'll start with you, Big D. How many wipes do you give Scarface?
So sometimes as we're recording, your score will change a little bit. As you talk about it and you're not just in a vacuum sitting there alone, it'll shift a bit. I was going to say this is a 1.25 wipe movie, but I actually think it's better than that. I think it's a 1 wipe movie. It's got a good story. It's brutal. It's violent. It's Pacino in his finest role, I think. The score is dated, but the synth community just fucking loves it. They love it. So I'll give it some fucking credit.
I'm sending
for that.
you a mix CD.
Okay, great. Make sure that's the metronome, like tick, tick, tick. I love that.
That's EDC. It's the start of modern EDC.
So I think the cinematography, it's beautiful. There's some memorable scenes, the way they use Miami, the little bit that they did shoot there. There's catchphrases that are truly iconic. But I've got to feel it's style over substance a lot of times. And I think there's some things today that we can look back on with other things like Narcos and Sicario to compare and say, okay, it's not realistic. It's difficult to really take seriously, but it wasn't supposed to be serious. It's like you said, Gene, there's more layers to it. But I think in spite of all that, I think it's easy to recommend. In the end, Scarface, yes, it is a good gangster drama. It is not up there with The Departed or Goodfellas or Godfather 1 or 2. But I think for what it is, I think it is a 1 wipe. It is flawed. It is a long movie, but it is well worth watching. And if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. But it is far from perfect.
I agree with you, only I'm going to be more critical of this movie, Big D. I don't see what the fuss is all about this movie. Again, this is the first time I watch it. And it's not terrible, but it's also not great. It's not groundbreaking. I think Al Pacino overacts. I think Michelle Pfeiffer underacts. Plus, again, as we mentioned, none of the main actors are Latin. It's very whitewashed. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't hold up to such modern day equivalents as Traffic, The Departed, series like Narcos, Breaking Bad, or even Weeds. And one of the main failures of this podcast, and if I could go back and turn back time, I would love to be part of that Casino podcast, because I think Casino is one of the best movies ever made. And it tells that story of a guy who starts from nothing and then falls down because he goes too far, or he lets it get to himself. Again, it's a very similar anti-hero arc. So, I mean, I wanted to give it a lower score, but I didn't want people who worship this movie's heads to explode or send their henchmen to kill me as I fall off of my second story into my indoor pool. So for that, I'm not going to give it, a great score, but I'm not going to give it a bad score. I'm going to give it right down the middle. I think it's 2.5 wipes. So that leaves you, Gene. How many wipes do you give Scarface?
Raj, you said this movie wasn't groundbreaking. I want to point out other movies that came out in 1983. You had Return of the Jedi, Terms of Endearment, Flashdance, Trading Places, War Games, Mr. Mom, Risky Business, Staying Alive. And then this fucking movie came out. Imagine you're in the theater and you were watching those other movies, and then you're like, oh shit, what's this? Oh, Scarface? That sounds like a nice movie. Let's go watch that. This was absolutely groundbreaking. This movie is brilliant. At times, I felt like it was a beloved novel. At times, I felt like the dialogue and the symbolism came straight out of my own mind, like someone was pillaging my dreams. I've rarely felt this in tune with a movie that we've watched for Shat the Movies. Pacino is amazing. Pfeiffer, Loggia, impeccable in their performances. And the whole thing is rife with intelligent observation on both the American dream and the human condition. But I will agree with you both. There are some shortcomings. Namely, the relationship between Gina and Tony is horribly melodramatic. It did not work. I appreciate the daring with the whole like incest thing. I appreciate the daring with appealing to Tony's protectiveness. But I think they aspired to do too much here. And the cast just wasn't up to the task on that specific job. The second thing I would complain about is the movie's length. At 3 hours, it's just too much. Even a person like me who watched the first half and was like, I love this. I did feel like you, Raj, that it kind of dragged on toward the end. It really should have been 2 movies. The first ending with Frank's death, the second ending with Tony's. It would have been perfect. As Big D said, the blimp would have been a perfect time. You've already got it on 2 cassettes. Just let it go like that. So for me, all that being said, and I can't believe I'm giving it a lower score than UHF, but this is a 1 white movie for me.
So if we were to add up 2.5 and then 2 1 wipes and then divide by 3 for our overall Shat score, what does that give us, Gene?
Raj, between the 3 of us, that averages out to 1.5 wipes for Scarface.
And Big D, if you were to look at the pantheon of Shat, which again, if you're playing the Shat the Movies drinking game, that was now's your time to drink. Where does that rank Scarface?
So this is movie number 133. And with a score of 1.5, that ties it now in the 41 spot with The Thing, Scrooged, and Spaceballs. It is better than Galaxy Quest and UHF and Gremlins, and it is slightly worse than The Matrix, Shawshank Redemption, Total Recall, and The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, that feels right.
Dude, it's tough. You're getting now where it's tiny fractions of a vote. If you're right now, I think if you're in the upper 1/3, which this movie is real close to, I think it's honorable. I think it's respectable.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done a real turd of a movie in a while.
I think that has something to do with the commissions. Thank you, everyone who's commissioning
yeah,
movies.
thank you, yeah.
But also, a lot of it has to do with, there's so many variables. It could be the barometric pressure, what mood Raj is in, how much sleep Big D got, whether or not I'm drunk, which, by the way, I'm on my 3rd old fashioned right now. So, a lot of those scores have to do with what's going on with us. If Carrie and I are having a conflict, whether the king bee got laid, lots of things are going on. So, the scores, I would say round them up always.
Like there's a curve is what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, now's the time of the podcast. Now that you have our Shat score, feel free to write us at hosts at Shat the Movies or follow us on Twitter and do all that. But while you're on our website, there's this one section where you can give us a shout out. Gene, what's a shout out?
Roger, shout out is our way of saying thank you for visiting shatthemovies.com, where you can vote for upcoming movies and help support the podcast. Just go to shatthemovies.com. And while you're on there, as Roger mentioned, give us a shout out. You just put your name in there. We'll read it on the podcast. This week's shout outs go out to Marion Cabretti Jr., a.k.a. Dildar, Big D's Little D, Tim, I have never seen Star Wars or Indiana Jones or any movie that is relevant, specifically Will Ferrell, as he is the worst. Kimmel from Kimmel Brothers Vending and Friends with Ryan and Patrick. Sonny Simmons, Robert Paul Champagne.
Oh my God. Robert Paul Champagne from your mom's house. That's great. Check him out on Instagram. Just check it out. Check it out. Just come over. You want to fuck me?
Okay. Kev B from the UK. Pocket Eights, Sean from New York, Krull, which, by the way, we've been getting a lot of requests for Krull.
Yeah.
Huge Ass, Jake 12 Bravo, Essayons, Dan Scothorn, Big D loves Kevin Smith, Kumail Nanjiani, Sean and Tracy from Chicago, Thrillo, Kevin 07 Rudd from Australia, Softness, Steve from Minnesota, vote for Wayne's World.
I could do that.
Clover Nikon, Frederick, Pennsylvania, Martin the Sheep, Pablo from Sydney, Chappie Masters 2020, Nancy never picked for a shout out sad face, Hoop Conjecture, and finally Trump 2020.
How did that make it?
Oh, shut up. Somebody said Obama 2020.
Yeah, I'm in for that.
We're equal to everybody. We don't care. Or at least I don't care.
Thanks, everyone, for your shout-outs. Again, if you'd like to hear your name on the podcast, just go to shatthemovies.com, fill out a shout-out sheet, and we'll read it right here. Back to you, Raj.
No, back to me. I've actually got
Back
a voicemail.
to you, Big D.
Yeah. I got 2 voicemails. We're going to do one this week, one next week. Besides emailing us, get some courage. Call the phone number. Give us a call. Give us a voicemail. Let us hear from you.
What's that phone number, Big D?
Oh, shit. I don't know.
914-719-SHAT.
That's right. 914-719-SHAT.
So this one, the caller did not identify himself, but he sounds like what I would expect a Shat the Movies listener to sound like.
Hi, Shat the Movies crew. I was just re-listening to your Weird Science episode and was positively tickled pink at Big D's stern warning not to look up what Kelly LeBrock looks like now. Sadly, I didn't listen and a part of me died. This inspired me to call in for 2 reasons. First, I had a similar experience when rewatching the movie Clue and looked up my old movie crush, Yvette the Maid. Do not do this. Naturally, I went straight to your podcast to get Big D's reaction and was equally horrified to discover this movie is not in your library. I ask that you consider reviewing this movie, and again, do not look up the actress that played Yvette. Some things are better left to your memory.
So here's my question. Was that background music selected for the call, or was that something he was just listening to?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of listeners that have interesting habits, and I think that this is probably his way of relaxing. You know, very similar to Gene's old-fashioned habit. He probably gets home and puts on that background music as he vacuums and does everyday normal household chores. But yeah, no, I agree with him. We need to do Clue. We need to do Wayne's World.
No. I think Gene's been looking up the maid.
No, I wasn't looking her up. I was just raising my hand because that background music is the main title theme from Clue.
Oh, okay.
So he's probably watching
sense.
it while requesting it. And by the way, Clue is fan-fucking-tastic.
It's one of the best movies ever made. I 100%
One of the best.
agree.
Oh, Jesus.
Clue might be a zero white movie.
This is coming from a guy who just gave 2.5 wipes to Scarface. One of the best movies ever made. It's Clue.
It's Clue. It's based off a board game. Big D, we're cleaning out the commission still. What's the next commission?
Well, next commission came from one of our. I think Ashley's been with us since Westworld. You think?
Yeah, she was one of the originals. She's the OG.
She is OG. She's been with us, forever. Contributor to the podcast, all of our TV, the movies. She's starting a podcast with her husband, Tom, who was in the hospital recently. Get better, Tom. About relationships, I believe. And it's going to come out in the beginning of the year. So we'll promote that when it comes out. But she has commissioned a movie that I have never seen. I've never seen a trailer. I'm going in completely blind, but I'll trust Ashley's taste. So the movie covers one random day in the San Fernando Valley, a dying father, a young wife, a male caretaker, a famous lost son, a police officer in love, a boy genius, an ex-boy genius, a game show host, and an estranged daughter will each become part of a dazzling multiplicity of plots, but one story. And was commissioned by Ashley Shafley, came out in December of 99, and I don't know what we're in for.
Yeah, it barely meets the qualification for this podcast. And I've seen this movie, Big D. It was a while ago, and I don't know if I was smart enough to understand it. I'm really going to lean on Gene's literary knowledge because I didn't get it the first time I watched it.
So there are two movies that have made me cry audibly in a theater, like so loudly that other people around me looked over. One of them was Big Fish, and the other one is this movie that Ashley's commissioned. It's intense. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's shot beautifully, but again, I don't know if I'm smart enough to understand it. I'm sure Ashley, being the intelligent professor that she is, has an entire breakdown of this. So hopefully she wrote in with what the meetings are. Kind of a tutorial, kind of an idiot's guide to this movie. But anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow @Shat the Movies. Our Facebook page is Shat the Movies. Just search for that. Our website, once again, is shatthemovies.com, where you can vote on upcoming movies. You can find all of our affiliate links. You can find our back catalog. Find everything about the podcast there. You can also email us your suggestions, or if you just want to connect with us, at hosts@shatthemovies.com. You can also donate and I guess support the podcast or financially contribute to the costs of these little independent podcasts that we got going on through multiple different ways. We accept PayPal, Venmo, or you can shop on Amazon through our affiliate link. And if you don't want to do any of that, you can just complete a survey for free. Just go to shatthemovies.com/survey. Thanks again, Dale Anderson, for this commission. We really appreciate it. Again, we're not making money off of this. We don't have a paywall. We never want to have that. We want to be open and be a podcast to the people. But again, your commissions do help us keep the lights on here and all of our Libsyn hosting services, and helps us grow and do other TV podcasts and all that kind of stuff. So again, thank you from the bottom of our heart over here at Shat on Entertainment. The best way to do it, though, is share with the friends. You know, you don't have to commission. Just tell someone, engage with us on Twitter. I love how much of a community we have on Twitter, which is really great. And it's just really cool. And people have sent us personal emails of how we've impacted their lives. And it just makes no sense to me, but it really means a lot. So anyone who's ever sent us a personal email or a DM, just know how much that really affects us. And thank you, really, from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah. And I think the biggest compliment that we can get is when somebody says, I feel like I'm sitting in a room with friends. And that's the goal of the podcast. I don't ever think it's us. Whatever. We're just three knuckleheads who have good conversations. We enjoy each other's company. And that you are in the room with us. If you were here, I guarantee you'd be on the mic. You know, so as we all travel around, we'll kind of let you know on social media. But we love meeting everybody. We love hearing from everybody. And I'm honestly moved that people let us into their lives. And it's the best reward I could have ever gotten for starting this 3 years ago almost.
Yeah.
God.
Gene and I have been at it even longer. God, if you can imagine that. Well, we're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to any of those if you stop by iTunes, which it's not iTunes anymore. It's just podcasts, right? They did away with it. I don't know what it's called anymore. But you can still leave a 5-star review. That does help the podcast grow as well. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Listen, if you're not watching Watchmen, you got to go see it. It's the best. And King B, super knowledgeable. There's so many Easter eggs. I'm loving uncovering the mystery with Gene and the King Bee. You can find all of our episodes and listener emails at shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D Dickieber, and Gene Coño Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie review. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Good night and good luck.
This is not an easy job. I have to take everything and play it as it lays. Sometimes people need a little help. Sometimes people need to be forgiven. And that is a very tricky thing on my part, making that call. But you can forgive someone? Well, that's the tough part. What can we forgive?
Was that unclear?
Kinda.
Oh, God.